A warm welcome, dear participants. We will start our final contribution, our final lecture of this conference, Living with the Earth from Charles Eisenstein. And before I will introduce Charles Eisenstein, I briefly want to explain the structure in this will take place. So Charles is located in the northeast of the United States of America, so he was not able to travel like all of you. And we will structure this contribution in such a way that Charles will start with his contribution. Then after a certain moment, he will close his first part, and then we open up for questions from the audience, from you. And please use the chat for this to post your questions. The questions will come to me, and I will post them to Charles. And then out of these questions, Charles will create the next part of his lecture. And in this way, it will be, yes, a new attempt to create an interactive lecture on a distance. So this will be the way we will go forward. And it will last about 45 minutes before we will go in the closing of this conference. So I would like to introduce and welcome you, Charles. Thank you very much that you connected. So as I said before, you are located in the far northeast of the United States of America. And you are known in the environmental movement. Actually, you're very well known in the environmental movement. You are described as one of the most influential thinkers. You're an author. You engaged yourself in your studies with philosophy and mathematics in Yale University. And after that, you went strong into the question of ecology, of environment, of our relationship to the earth, to nature, but also to economics. And you wrote different books that got a lot of resonance. For example, your latest book was Climate: A New Story, but also Sacred Economics is a well-known work of you. And as part of the introduction, I wanted to ask you, if you could start with the reason why you chose the title, The Living Earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Johannes. I think that I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one who thinks that the solution to our climate crisis or our ecological crisis is not just to be a little more clever in treating Earth as an engineering object, or treating Earth as a source of raw materials and a dump for our waste. That even if we add to our calculations of cost and benefit, we add carbon sequestration and carbon emissions and try to do better math in our calculations of profit and loss, still, that's not going to be enough. In fact, we're seeing evidence of this as some of the policies that are put in place because of carbon considerations are actually causing more harm than good. For example, many power plants in Germany and in England are burning wood chips. They were coal-fired power plants converted to burn wood chips that are coming from forests that are getting cut down in Namibia, in Romania, in the Baltics. Very short-sighted. But this is the kind of thing that happens when we see Earth as kind of a machine. So the transition that we are in goes all the way to humanity's fundamental relationship to Earth, the way that we see Earth, and the way that we understand ourselves as beings on Earth, the way that we answer the question, why are we here? What is the purpose of humanity? A generation ago, 2 generations ago, the answer was obvious. or it seemed obvious. We are here to become the lords and masters of creation. We are here to transcend all natural limitations, and we're going to imprint human intelligence onto a world that has no intelligence, because it's just protons, neutrons, and electrons. It's just these building blocks. This attitude of conquering nature was unproblematic at the time. And if you were a young person back then, your participation in that project of domination, of conquest, would fill you with ambition and energy and meaning. Excuse me. Because our lives get meaning from the larger cultural myth that we live in. And that has changed. We are transitioning into a different myth, and we are understanding that Earth is alive, and our purpose is to contribute to the life of Earth, to be servants of life and beauty on Earth. Luckily, we have, so this is not entirely new. Indigenous cultures around the world for thousands of years, and to this day, have that understanding. They know that humans are not the only beings here, and that everything in the world is a being, and the world itself is a being. Water, soil, all the animals, all the plants, even the wind, the sun, the clouds, the earth itself, all of these are beings. They are alive. They are even conscious. They are sacred. We're also fortunate in our own tradition to have visionary people, visionary people who have brought the message coming from the past and from the future that we are not alone here and that Earth is alive. Rudolf Steiner would be an example. And the biodynamic agriculture that he founded, if you really look at its basic principles, it understands Earth as a being, soil as a being, not just a mix of chemicals. The practices that come from this, because they start by understanding Earth as a being, they contribute to Earth as a being. They don't deplete the soil, they enrich the soil. So this is a step on the direction that we need to go if we're going to have a future where Earth continues to be alive. Our human stories are very powerful. Our word is powerful. The way that we attach symbol to reality is powerful. It changes reality. If we have a story, a mythology that says Earth is dead, and this is the mythology of modernity that says Earth is dead. If we have that, we will create the world in its image. We will create a dead world. We will kill the world. And we can see that future before us. It's a future where, excuse me, just a minute. Yeah, it's morning here. Yes, a future. We can see this possibility of a dead world where all food is grown in hydroponics factories or big fermentation vats, well, we're already going in that direction, monocrops, growing things in dead soil. We can see that future where nature has died and humanity still persists. That is what happens if we continue to see the world as a mechanism, and we deny our growing intuition that Earth is an organism, not a mechanism. So applying this to climate change, it gives rise to a different set of priorities. In the mechanical view, the highest priority is to reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by any means necessary. In the living Earth view, we understand that the health of the climate and the health of the soil and the health of the oceans, the health of the whales, the health of the wolves, the beavers, every animal, every plant, every system on Earth, we understand that these are all related. And that if we could cut emissions to zero, but if we continue to kill the organs of a living being, of an organism, if we continue to kill the forests, cut down the forests, if we continue to douse the earth in insecticide all the time to fight pests, if we continue to pump toxic waste into the environment, to destroy habitats, to drain wetlands, to develop mangroves, if we continue to damage the organs of the organism, then the organism dies of organ failure. It dies a death of 1 million cuts. A lot of what is blamed on greenhouse gases is actually caused by ecosystem destruction. It's like if you started to harm the organs in your body, eventually you might get a fever. We call that climate change. We call that global warming. But it may not be a fever. It may be maybe fever and then low temperatures and then high and then low. It might be derangement. It might be unbalanced fluctuations. Sometimes I say, you know, I'm actually more afraid of global cooling than global warming. Not because I'm afraid of an ice age, but because when the environmental movement puts all of its eggs in one basket and says, we have to protect ecosystems because of global warming, then what happens if global warming slows down? Then we have no argument anymore. But when we understand that this precious earth is interconnected and alive, and it has a physiology, then every precious place needs to be protected. And in fact, okay, yes, and I want to talk about agriculture because what does agriculture look like when we transition to this new story? Instead of extracting from the soil, it becomes to heal the soil, to enrich the soil. Understanding that because we are not separate from Earth, that what we do to the soil ultimately comes back to ourselves. Today we have a modern industrial agricultural system that produces lots and lots of calories, lots and lots of macronutrients, lots and lots of the things that we can measure. And it looks, at least superficially, that that system is successful. However, on a deeper level, the impoverishment of the soil, the impoverishment of the biodiversity of the soil, the ecological simplification, this, because we are not separate, this corresponds to an impoverishment of our society, an impoverishment of our souls, and an impoverishment of our bodies. And we say, well, maybe we need this supplement and that supplement, and this entertainment and that entertainment, and this medication and that medication to make up for this loss. But again, none of that is ever going to compensate for the loss of the relationships to life, to soil, to water. This is what the restoration is. It's coming back into relationship. A lot of the practices of biodynamic agriculture are incomprehensible to the reductionistic scientific mind that thinks in terms of chemical ingredients, that thinks in terms of analysis, to break it down to its basic parts and understand it that way. It only makes sense if you understand that you are relating to a being. Yeah, maybe I'll just say one more thing before we go to questions. This whole thing started with agriculture. By the whole thing, I mean civilization, technology, industry, patriarchy. All of it started with agriculture. It makes sense, therefore, that the reversal of this story, or the transcendence of this story, also starts with agriculture. That some of the, maybe the most important thing that we can do right now, this is interesting because in my childhood, in my father's childhood, the farmer was the lowest profession. It was a term of, it was an insult to call somebody a farmer, or a rube, a bumpkin. All of the synonyms for farmer were insults. And the goal of people who lived on the land was to get your kids educated, get them to college, get them to university. They can become an engineer, they can become a lawyer, they can become an astronaut, they can leave behind a professor, a consultant, leaving behind materiality. This social hierarchy where the lowest is the one with his hands in the dirt and the highest is the one who is completely dissociated from materiality is thousands of years old, actually. So you can see now, as more and more young people want to go back to the land, we can see that the change in front of us is profound. It is a change that is thousands of years in the making. It's a new era from the one that has gone back thousands of years, because a lot of young people now want to go back to the land. And that purpose, which draws from a new human purpose, well, a new and ancient human purpose, which is to serve life. That is where meaning comes from. That is where purpose comes from. If you're a young person and you connect to that, whether it's through farming or something else, but if you connect to the collective purpose of healing and serving life on earth, then you will feel purposeful. You'll know why you're here. You'll feel like, yeah, I'm doing what I came here to do. So, okay. Yeah, I realize that was, some of that was quite abstract, but feel free with whatever questions you have to bring it back down to earth or follow any other direction. I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much for this very dense and first picture of maybe the question, what is going on also. And yeah, I want to invite and to also stimulate the audience to really ask the questions to Charles that you have now, so we can weave them in the conversation. And yeah, maybe I can start with maybe an obvious question that comes out, especially of the last point you shared with us. Namely, you said it all started with agriculture, civilization, and now we came into a kind of climax or anticlimax, and the key is there where it started, agriculture, what you said. And so, of course, there's quite a heavy weight on the shoulder of the farmer, you could say, from this perspective. So my first question to you would be, what would be your, so to say, golden question to the biodynamic farmers that are looking now and watching now to this session? What would be your question out of this context to them, and also, of course, to the young people that are engaged with this topic?
It's not that I have a question for them. It's just that I want to remind them of something that they know in their hearts to be true, which is that their work is important and meaningful, because maybe sometimes you have a voice that says, gosh, all these big problems in the world, these big crises, and I'm just in my little garden or on my little farm. What good is that going to do? But on a deeper level, you understand that this is important. And I'd like to say that this earth has suffered a lot of abuse. And it's almost here, I'm just going to say, I'm going to speak as if Earth really is a being, okay? And I think, how would she feel in her situation? Suffering so much abuse, so much ingratitude. Maybe she's ready to give up. But every time that somebody respects her, nourishes her, holds her as sacred, she's like, oh, maybe I am loved. Maybe there is hope. Maybe I won't give up. So even if in the big picture, it looks like you are doing a very small thing, every act of service, every humble service to this earth, to this soil, and to the life in it, is a kind of a prayer that helps Earth stay alive. And you're acting from a story that says Earth is alive. Otherwise, biodynamic agriculture is just ridiculous. The fact that you're even doing it means that you are on some level seeing Earth as alive. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be able to do it. You'd be, this is silly. Why am I burying a cow horn full of quartz crystals in the earth? Like, that only makes sense if you're engaging a being. So I don't have a question for the biodynamic farmers. I have just some gratitude that you've continued to do this work, even in a society that says that it's, fantasy. Yeah.
Thank you. I have some two questions that came from the audience to start. So there is the question of how do we merge all these insights into the places where decisions are being made, so into politics, and how do we get them out of circles where we actually already know them? You could maybe even say this conference.
Yeah. Part of the way that we do that is that we have conferences like this, where we remind each other that we're not crazy and we generate a strong energy. It's, the phrase in English, oh, he's just preaching to the choir, the church choir. These are people who already believe. And if you just preach to the church choir, then what good are you doing? You need to go out and preach to the unbelievers in the streets to convert them, right? But it's also actually important to preach to the choir so that you can make really beautiful music together. And that is attractive to those on the outside who are, maybe their heart really isn't in it anymore. Maybe the conventional farmers are struggling with debt and seeing their land wither and depressed and sad that the soil is dying and that the well that grandfather dug has dried up. Excuse me. And so the conversations that we have I wish we were having a physical gathering, but the conversations that we nourish in gatherings like this and that we strengthen then enable us to speak to those in power. or to speak to those who are maybe in conversation with that. We change the cultural climate through these events. And some people, yeah, like some people, they're just going to have their hands in the dirt and they're going to grow things. And others are going to tell the story of that. So what changes? It's not that you, the first step is not to go to somebody in power and convince them that they were wrong and that they have to change policy. Even if you do that, they will tell you, I'm sorry. Like, suppose that you do change their mind. They tell you, I'm sorry, I'm just one person. And you know, there's the system of subsidies in the EU, and that's hard to change. And there's the international financial markets that punish any country that puts up trade barriers to protect agriculture. And I mean, it doesn't start at the top. The top is important, and some people have the destiny to speak to those in power and to work inside those systems. I'm not saying that's not important, but it's not the only thing that's important. Changing the cultural climate is important. Nourishing new conversations is important. Giving people the experience of eating local food that has extra vitality, that's important too. Anyone who has eaten biodynamic food and is in relation with the farmer, they're going to be resistant to some of the next European Union regulation. So anyway, there's no shortcut answer to that. I don't have my magic plan that's going to, you know, change public policy. But yeah.
So there are many questions coming. So I just keep on passing them on. So there's one question you said about the role of agriculture. The young people are wonder how can they return to the land if the land is in the hands of a few?
Yeah. You know, I'm more familiar with my country, where the average age of a farmer is something like 67, average age, which means, like, you know, half of them are even older than that. And you know, many of them face like, what am I going to do with my land? My children all moved to the city. There's a lot of land out there. There's a whole organization in this country called what's the name of it? I think the Agricultural Trust. I can't remember the name of the organization, but they find land that's owned by churches and religious organizations that they're not doing anything with it, that they then negotiate and make available to young farmers. So there's a lot of land out there, and it's just a matter of, you know, I mean, I'm not I could give maybe practical advice on how to find it, but when you are when you have an authentic desire to find it and an availability to it, then you'll start to find those opportunities, and the land itself will call to you. The land itself, remember, is a living being. It is attuned to your yearning, to your desire to serve, and it will arrange synchronicities that bring the land to you. Maybe not quite how you imagined. Maybe you don't get the legal title to the land, but some opportunity, the land doesn't care if you own the legal title or not. The land will give you a walk of trust. And maybe you will be a steward there. Maybe you will be there for a few seasons, and then maybe something else will happen to keep you there. We have to trust these powers and make ourselves available to them.
you. So there are more questions. We cannot all post them now, but I have one question, and that I want to use as a bridge for you to go into the final part that you can take over and after that close. And that is the question that is connected to what we have discussed the previous days, and especially also yesterday in our panel and playing with the audience. And there was also this understanding of there is this movement on and wish from a certain group of people to go back to the land and to leave the city and so on, but that this is also, and to also protest against politics, against climate crisis and so on, but this is also a question of privilege, and that there are also a lot of people in this world that are actually trying to leave the land out of several reasons and go to the cities. Or yeah, we had stories from a panelist that the grandparents were fighting to go to the city to leave the poor circumstances of the land. And so this is the other perspective of the story, you could say. And so I wanted to ask if you could go into the last part with this question, combined with that I know that you speak Mandarin, that you have a strong connection to China, and that there's also maybe a different perspective.
Yeah, okay, so you could say, well, it's very privileged of you to want to go back to the land, but you know, the world's poor can't afford to do that. They need to go to the cities where the economic opportunities are. Well, is this a law of the universe? We have to ask, why are the economic opportunities in the cities? Why is the countryside impoverished? A lot of the reason is that the global economic system, particularly the debt system, impoverish, and the free trade agreements, which is basically imperialism and colonialism, they make rural subsistence agriculture impossible in the entire global South. So it's not that they want to, that they have some inherent desire to leave the land and to better themselves. It's that they're forced off the land, sometimes literally by force. Communal lands getting converted into private land holdings. This is something that I believe the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation promotes in the world, the clarification of land title. What that really means is that communal land becomes private property, or there's the agricultural programs that promote GMOs and pesticide-intensive agriculture, giving farmers loans to buy the seeds, and then commodity prices fall and the farmers go into debt and they lose land that has been in their family for 20 generations. Maybe they commit suicide, and maybe their kids only survive by going to the cities and finding jobs there. So it's not, so yeah, like if we're going to talk about privilege, we have to talk about the system that extracts wealth from the third world and brings it into the West. That is the same system that makes peasant agriculture uneconomic and that causes urbanization, which then we think is just a law of the universe. Now, there's other reasons besides economic for urbanization. One of them is called propaganda. The propagation of the mindset that says that the earth is lowly, that the farmer is backward, and that human evolution and progress means that you leave the land, leave materiality, enter the world of abstractions, of the mind, of money. So again, you can see how deep the radicalism goes here. You have to question everything. Radical meaning to the root. And what was the other thing you asked me to bring in there?
Yeah, that was your connection to China.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. when many of the same forces are at work there. When you replace traditional agriculture with mechanized industrial agriculture, you don't need so many farmers. And this migration off the farm has been going on in the West since the 17th century and the Enclosure Acts, which again, it stole communal land. It's been happening all over the world. So there's a systemic interest in getting cheap labor that is part of this process of pushing people off the land. So China 30 years ago was 80% farmers. Now I think it's like 40 or 50%, which is still a lot. In the United States, it's about 1%. I think we need to reverse this. To really farm the land well requires more attention. You can't just treat it as an industrial blank slate where you apply formulas, standard processes to standard inputs to create standard outputs. That's industrial agriculture. That's what industry is. It doesn't understand the livingness of the earth. When you understand that, it becomes about relationship. And the practices that work on this farm aren't going to work 100 miles away or maybe even next door. So to farm well, to farm with the consciousness of a living earth, it has to be more local, it has to be more hands-on, it has to be more labor intensive. In the mindset of technology, more labor intensive is bad. In the mindset of the Industrial Revolution, work is bad. Human progress means to do less work, to have machines do it for us. That is changing as well. Why should we think that agricultural work is bad? On a monocrop farm, it can be very tedious and laborious. But what about in a small-scale garden or a diverse ecological farm? I'm not making this up. My brother is a farmer. I work on his farm. It's not the back-breaking, mind-numbing labor of industrial agriculture. So I think we have to, as a society, here's like a concrete policy. It's to say, yeah, let's increase that 1% of people who are farmers. Let's make that back up to 10% maybe, which is what it was in 1950, or 20%, or maybe 50% should have a garden at least. Would we be, is that moving backwards? Would life be worse if people were with the soil and with the plants more? No, life would be better. So part of this is actually to reverse some of the deep assumptions behind what is privilege and what isn't. This gets abstract, but I'll just say, our notion of what constitutes privilege in part encodes the very values that underlie privilege. That says that the privileged life, as it is in our society, is the best life, where you sit in front of a computer and you order everything you need online and it comes to your door and you never have to do any work. That's privilege. Is that happiness, though? Is that authenticity? Is that fulfillment? Is that joy? No.
Thank you. So we have a few more minutes left, maybe 5 more minutes. So if I hear between the lines what you're saying and what you've said, is that in a way you have the storytellers and you have the people who are maybe making the story. And that the people who are making the story might be the farmers or the new farmers, so to say, of this age, of this time. And yeah, this related to a question you've already shared some points, but what are key points or leverage points where you then, as a storyteller or as a story maker, as a farmer, where you can start, so to say? What are these exact points?
I'm not quite exactly sure what you mean, but I'll just, maybe I do have a couple more thoughts. To tell a story in which farmers are important again, I think that the climate issue is part of that, can be part of that. Because when you really look at, even if you're just looking at carbon numbers, really the only way to significantly take carbon out of the atmosphere, reduce CO2 levels, is through regenerative agriculture, to put it back in the soil. And from the carbon reductionist view of climate change, that is the most important thing we could be doing. From the living systems view, the living planet view, that's also the most important thing we could be doing, or maybe second most important. Most important is to preserve existing intact ecosystems, like the Amazon, like the Congo, like healthy marine ecosystems, mangroves. That's the most important thing, because those are the organs that are still vital, that are still healthy. And as long as those are still healthy, there's always hope. But then almost as important or equally important is to restore the damaged organs. So whether you're talking from carbon dioxide view, probably some of you know how much carbon, how quickly, like according to the Rodale Institute, which has done, actual research measuring carbon sequestration, converting even half the world's agriculture to regenerative practices would draw down all emissions. Like, it's not a hard problem to solve if we hold agriculture sacred again and earth and land sacred again. And so to practice this, or to tell the story of this, is an important act of service to this world. Yeah, and there are some who can bring this into policy conversations, using those numbers. And I think when we do that, though, we have to recognize that this shift isn't coming from the numbers. We have to speak to that within our fellow humans, whether they are political leaders or in business, or just the young people who maybe want to be farmers or who want to serve life in some way. We have to speak to the heart level that wants the same thing we want, that knows that we are here to serve life. And then the numbers, they can help placate the skeptics, the internal and external skeptics, the bean counters. But they're not really what persuades people. The persuasion happens on a deeper level. So, yeah, I think everybody already knows what I'm saying here. Like, nothing I've said to you is something you didn't already know. It's a knowledge that, yeah. Yes.
No, I think it's beautiful what you said, and also this final note that yesterday we connected the feeding life, what you said, which is the relationship to the other, to the breathing. And I think that, yeah, maybe it could also be a final note, what you say, that we are here to serve life. And I think this understanding out of what you brought, to see agriculture as maybe the beginning point of civilization and a drastic change, and also now as the beginning point of this this shift we need, that those are very powerful indications also. So I think I would like to thank you very much for this contribution.
Yeah, thank you, Johannes. It was my honor to speak to you all.
Yes, and you're very welcome one day to visit the Goetheanum and to get to know the people here. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.